The arrival of the challenge. The galaxy was alive with energy as the grand arena on Ceylon Prime roared with excitement. Billions of beings from countless star systems had gathered to witness the annual intergalactic trials, a competition where the strongest, smartest, and most resilient warriors from different species competed for ultimate glory. It was a stage where legends were born, and humanity's teams stood out, not for their strength, but for their perceived weakness. Among the crowd, towering alien species watched with amusement. The Lyrian warriors, a race of giant, muscular beings known for their unparalleled strength, were the reigning champions. Their leader, Khazar, stood over 9 feet tall, his body a sculpture of hardened muscle and glowing scars, trophies from countless battles. Humans. Khazar's booming voice echoed through the arena, silencing the chatter. His yellow eyes gleamed with disdain as he pointed a clawed finger at the human delegation. You call yourselves warriors. Your bodies are too fragile, your strength laughable. Is there no one among you brave enough to face a real challenge? The crowd erupted into laughter, the sound like a wave crashing over the humans. Commander Ethan Wells felt the weight of their mockery but stood his ground. At 6'2", with a lean, athletic build and sharp blue eyes, Ethan didn't look like much compared to the hulking aliens around him. But he was known for something far more important, his unshakable resolve. Ethan stepped forward, his boots clicking against the metal floor of the arena. The spotlight fell on him, and a hush swept through the crowd. "I'll take your challenge, Khazar," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But don't mistake physical strength for true power. I'll show you what humanity is capable of." Khazar threw back his head and laughed, a deep, guttural sound. "You? A human. This will be amusing." He stepped closer, towering over Ethan like a mountain over a sapling. "We'll make it fair, or as fair as it can be for someone as weak as you. 3 trials: strength, speed, and endurance. If, by some miracle, you survive, I might even respect you." Ethan's lips curled into a small smile. "I'll do more than survive. I'll win." The audience gasped at his boldness, and even Khazar's smirk faltered for a moment. But he quickly regained his composure, turning to the crowd. "You hear that? This human thinks he can win. Let's see how far his arrogance takes him." The Lyrian warriors around Khazar roared in approval, pounding their fists against their chests in a deafening rhythm. Ethan turned back to his team, a small group of human scientists, engineers, and strategists who had been working tirelessly to prepare for the trials. Dr. Mara Singh, the team's lead scientist, gave him a worried look. "Ethan," she whispered as he approached, "are you sure about this? The Lyrians are engineered for combat. Their bones are stronger than steel, and their muscles generate enough force to crush a boulder." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Mara, this isn't just about me. It's about showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. They think we're weak because we don't look like them. But strength isn't just about muscles. It's about heart, strategy, and refusing to back down." Mara sighed but nodded. "Just don't get yourself killed." The trials were set to begin in an hour, giving Ethan little time to prepare. He spent the next few minutes reviewing the rules and examining the arena, a massive high-tech structure filled with obstacles, challenges, and dangers designed to test every aspect of a warrior's abilities. The first trial, the test of strength, would be particularly difficult. Ethan knew he couldn't match Khazar's raw power, but he had a plan. As the countdown to the first trial began, the arena's energy shifted. The crowd grew restless with anticipation, their eyes fixed on the 2 competitors. Ethan stood in his corner, his heart pounding but his mind focused. Across from him, Khazar flexed his massive arms, his confidence radiating like heat. "Last chance to back out, human," Khazar taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. Ethan met his gaze without flinching. "Not a chance." The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, signaling the start of the first trial. The crowd erupted into cheers and chants, the noise shaking the ground beneath Ethan's feet. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. This was more than a competition. It was a battle for humanity's pride, a chance to prove that strength came in many forms, and Ethan Wells was determined to rise to the challenge. The terms of the duel. The air in the arena felt charged, as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath. The spotlight remained fixed on Ethan Wells and Kezar, their starkly different forms emphasizing the gap between humanity and the Lyrian warriors. Kezar stood like a living monument to strength, his towering frame casting a long shadow over the human commander. Yet Ethan's steady gaze and calm posture seemed to shrink that shadow, if only in spirit. Kezar stepped forward, the ground trembling beneath his massive feet. His booming voice carried across the arena. "Since you're so eager to humiliate yourself, human, let's set the terms. 3 trials: strength, speed, and endurance. The rules are simple. Survive, if you can. Victory goes to the one who outlasts or outperforms their opponent." Ethan crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "That's all. You call yourself a warrior, but these trials only measure brute force. Strength is useless without intelligence. How about we raise the stakes? Add a 4th trial: strategy." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The very suggestion of adding a test of strategy had caught the attention of the spectators, especially the more intellectual species present. The Lyrian warriors prided themselves on their physical dominance, but they were not known for their tactical prowess. Kezar's yellow eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as he regarded Ethan with a mix of irritation and amusement. "Strategy. You want to pit your fragile brain against mine. Fine. I'll indulge your desperation. But when you fail, it will only make your defeat more satisfying." The crowd roared its approval, the sheer noise shaking the arena walls. Ethan's calm demeanor remained intact as he turned back to his team. Dr. Mara Singh rushed to his side, her brow furrowed in concern. "Ethan, what are you doing? You've just made this even harder for yourself," she hissed. Ethan smirked, leaning in so only she could hear. "I didn't make it harder, Mara. I made it fair. He's strong, but he's arrogant. Arrogance blinds you to possibilities. The strategy trial is where we'll win." Mara bit her lip, but she nodded, recognizing the spark of confidence in Ethan's eyes. She handed him a small device, an advanced comm unit connected to the team's database. "We'll feed you data when the time comes. Just be careful. This isn't just about you anymore. The whole galaxy is watching." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know. That's why I can't back down." The arena's announcer, a floating eye orb with a booming metallic voice, interrupted their exchange. "The terms have been set. The trials will begin shortly. First trial: test of strength. Contestants to repair yours ELVs." The spotlight shifted, illuminating the first trials arena. A colossal pit filled with massive stone pillars, each weighing several tons. The task was simple: lift a pillar, carry it across the arena, and stack it on the opposite side. The catch: the pillars were embedded with destabilizing energy cores that made them heavier the longer they were held. Kezar let out a deep, rumbling laugh. "This will be over quickly. Your fragile human bones won't last a second under the weight." Ethan tilted his head, feigning indifference. "We'll see." As the competitors stepped into the pit, the crowd buzzed with excitement. The sight of the Lyrian champion squaring off against the human commander was a spectacle no one wanted to miss. Ethan adjusted the exosuit he wore beneath his uniform, its sleek design a product of human ingenuity. It wasn't just a tool. It was his edge. The announcer's voice boomed again. "The test of strength begins in 3, 2, 1. Start." Kezar immediately seized the nearest pillar, his massive arms bulging as he hoisted it into the air with ease. The crowd erupted into cheers as he began his march across the pit, his movements slow but confident. Each step seemed to announce his dominance, his muscles rippling under the weight. Ethan, meanwhile, took a different approach. Instead of rushing, he examined the pillar closest to him, noting its design and the glow of its energy core. He tapped into his comm unit. "Mara, any data on these cores?" Her voice crackled through the earpiece. "The energy cores are destabilizers. The longer they're active, the heavier the pillar gets. If you overload the core briefly, it might reset the weight." "Got it," Ethan muttered. He activated a small device embedded in his suit, sending a pulse through the pillar's core. The glow flickered, and for a brief moment, the weight seemed to lessen. Using this window, Ethan lifted the pillar, his exosuit amplifying his strength. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human began his march. Khazar glanced over his shoulder, his smug expression faltering as he saw Ethan carrying his pillar. "Emph. A trick. That's all you have." Ethan didn't respond, focusing instead on his steps. Every movement was calculated, every ounce of energy conserved. The exosuit was doing most of the heavy lifting, but Ethan knew he couldn't rely on it for too long. The pillar's weight would increase again, and he needed to reach the other side before that happened. As Khazar reached the halfway point, he paused to flex for the crowd, earning a deafening roar of approval. Ethan, however, pressed on, his pace steady and unrelenting. The crowd began to take notice, murmurs of surprise spreading like wildfire. By the time Ethan reached the other side and placed his pillar down, a ripple of disbelief swept through the arena. The human had completed the task, not with brute force, but with precision and ingenuity. Khazar finished moments later, his jaw clenched as he realized the human wasn't as weak as he'd assumed. Ethan straightened, meeting Khazar's glare with a calm smile. "Looks like your strength isn't the only thing that matters." The crowd erupted, half in awe and half in confusion. The test of strength had ended, but it was clear the true battle was only beginning. The first trial, strength. The air in the arena seemed heavier as the crowd settled into an electrified hush. The test of strength wasn't just a competition. It was a statement of dominance, a show of raw power that the Lyrian warriors had long used to establish their superiority over other species. The colossal stone pillars glimmered under the harsh arena lights, their embedded energy cores pulsing faintly like the beating heart of a beast. Khazar stood at one end of the arena, his broad chest heaving as he relished the crowd's chants of his name. "This is what you wanted, human," he called out, his voice like the growl of a distant thunderstorm. "A chance to prove your strength. Let's see how long you last." Ethan Wells, standing at the opposite end, was a stark contrast. While Khazar radiated brute force and intimidation, Ethan exuded quiet determination. His exosuit hummed faintly as it calibrated to his movements, its sleek design a testament to humanity's innovation. He stretched his arms, testing the suit's responsiveness, and took a deep breath to steady his mind. The arena announcer's booming voice interrupted the tension. "The first trial. Test of strength. The rules are simple. Lift a pillar, carry it across the arena, and stack it on the platform at the opposite end. Failure to complete. The task results in elimination. Begin in 3, 2, 1. A deafening gong signaled the start. Khazar moved first, striding toward the nearest pillar with an air of casual confidence. His massive hands gripped the rough stone, and with a grunt, he heaved it into the air as if it weighed no more than a feather. The crowd erupted into cheers as the Lyrian warrior began his march across the arena. The pillar balanced effortlessly on his broad shoulders. Ethan, meanwhile, approached his chosen pillar with a more measured pace. He placed a gloved hand on the surface, feeling the faint vibration of the energy core within. His comm unit crackled to life in his ear as Dr. Marasingh's voice came through. "Ethan, remember, the energy cores increase the weight exponentially the longer they're active. If you can disrupt the core's stability, You'll buy yourself a few seconds of reduced weight." Ethan nodded slightly, his fingers finding the hidden activation panel on his suit's wrist. "Understood. Let's hope this works." Khazar was already halfway across the arena, his strides slow but steady. The crowd cheered louder with every step he took, their confidence in his victory growing by the second. Meanwhile, Ethan activated the disruptor in his suit, sending a short pulse of energy into the core. The pillar's faint glow flickered, and for a brief moment, the crushing weight lessened. Taking advantage of the window, Ethan bent his knees and wrapped his arms around the pillar. With the assistance of the exosuit's strength augmentation, he lifted it off the ground. The strain was evident, even with the suit's help, but Ethan gritted his teeth and took his first step. The crowd fell silent for a moment, watching in stunned disbelief. A human, a species they had dismissed as frail and insignificant, was carrying a pillar. Though his progress was slower than Khazar's, every step he took was a declaration of defiance. Khazar reached the other side first, slamming his pillar onto the platform with a resounding thud. He turned to the crowd, raising his arms in triumph, his biceps bulging as the crowd roared. "This is what strength looks like," he bellowed. But the roar faltered as the crowd noticed Ethan still moving. His steps were deliberate, his breathing controlled. The disruptor's effect had worn off, and the full weight of the pillar bore down on him now, but he didn't stop. His suit groaned under the strain, and sweat dripped from his brow, but his resolve was unshaken. With a final, agonizing step, Ethan reached the platform. The crowd gasped as he placed the pillar down, his movements careful and precise. He straightened, his chest rising and falling heavily, and turned to face Khazar. "You're stronger," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "But strength isn't just about lifting weights, it's about knowing how to use it." The arena fell into an uneasy silence. Khazar's triumphant grin wavered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He stomped forward, his heavy footfalls shaking the ground. "You may have finished the trial, human," he growled, "but you're barely standing. You won't survive the next round." Ethan met his gaze with unwavering calm. "We'll see." The announcer's voice broke the tension. "The first trial is complete. Both competitors AAVPASSED. Prepare for the second trial. Speed." The crowd erupted into a mix of cheers and murmurs. While Khazar still had their favor, the human had earned a sliver of their respect. For the first time in years, the Lyrian champion faced an opponent who refused to crumble under pressure. As Ethan returned to his team, Mara rushed to him, scanning his suit for damage. "You did it," she whispered, half in awe and half in disbelief. "But the next trial?" "I'll handle it," Ethan said, cutting her off gently. His eyes were locked on Khazar, who was flexing his muscles for the crowd again. "This isn't just a test of strength. It's a test of endurance, strategy, and will. And humanity has all of those in spades." He turned back toward the arena, his resolve unshaken. The next trial was waiting, and he was ready to face it. The second trial, speed. The arena transformed before their eyes. The stone pillars and platforms were replaced by a sprawling obstacle course that stretched into the horizon. It was a labyrinth of towering walls, spinning blades, lava pits, and electrified barriers, an unforgiving gauntlet designed to test not just speed, but precision, agility, and nerves of steel. Above the course, floating drones projected holographic screens to ensure every spectator could witness the competitor's every move. Khazar smirked as he studied the course. "Speed. You think you stand a chance here, human. My legs cover twice the distance of yours with a single step." Ethan Wells, standing at the starting line, ignored the taunt. He tightened the straps of his suit and activated its tactical interface. His visor lit up, overlaying the course with real-time data, distances, energy fields, trap patterns, and recommended routes. This wasn't just about raw speed. It was about using every advantage humanity had developed through ingenuity. The announcer's metallic voice echoed across the arena. Second trial. Speedy. The goal is simple. Navigate and reach the finish line. Obstacles must avoid penalties. Begin in 3, 2, 1. The gong sounded, and both competitors launched forward. Khazar exploded into motion, his massive frame surging ahead with incredible power. His muscles rippled with each stride, propelling him over smaller obstacles without breaking pace. The crowd roared with excitement as he barreled through a series of spinning blades, his brute strength allowing him to shatter one that got too close. Ethan, however, took a different approach. While Khazar relied on his sheer size to overcome obstacles, Ethan used precision. His smaller frame and enhanced suit allowed him to slip through narrow gaps and avoid traps altogether. At the first electrified barrier, Khazar roared and leaped over it, his legs clearing the deadly energy field with ease. Ethan, on the other hand, analyzed the barrier's timing and slid under it at the perfect moment, the electricity crackling just inches above him. As they reached the halfway point, Khazar had a noticeable lead. His brute force and long strides seemed to make him unstoppable. But the course was about to shift. Ahead of them was a section known as the Chaos Zone, a series of platforms suspended over bubbling lava pits. The platforms rotated and shifted unpredictably, and any misstep would send the competitor plunging into the molten abyss below. Khazar reached the zone first, his confidence undeterred. He leaped onto the first platform, his weight causing it to tilt dangerously. Without hesitation, he jumped to the next, his powerful legs absorbing the shock of each landing. The crowd erupted in cheers as he progressed, his movements reckless but effective. Ethan arrived moments later, taking a brief pause to study the platforms. His visor analyzed their movements, calculating patterns and predicting their shifts. "Mara," he whispered into his comm, "any advice?" Dr. Mara Singh's voice crackled in his ear. "The platforms are synced to a central system. If you move at exactly the right intervals, you can cross without causing them to destabilize." Ethan nodded and took a deep breath. While Khazar powered through with brute strength, Ethan moved with precision, timing each leap perfectly. Where Khazar's landing sent platforms wobbling, Ethan's careful footfalls barely disturbed them. The crowd, initially focused on Khazar, began to murmur in amazement as the human navigated the Chaos Zone with surgical accuracy. Halfway through the zone, Khazar glanced back and saw Ethan closing the gap. His smug grin faded, replaced by a scowl. "You're persistent, human," he growled, "but this is where it ends." Reaching the final platform, Khazar unleashed his strength, leaping over 3 shifting platforms in a single bound to land just shy of the exit. The crowd erupted into a frenzy as he raised a fist in triumph, ready to finish the trial. But his moment of pride came too soon. Ethan, still in the Chaos Zone, made a bold move. Using the suit's energy reserves, he activated a short burst of thrusters built into the boots. The added propulsion sent him soaring over 2 platforms, landing lightly on the next. He repeated the maneuver twice more, and before Khazar could react, Ethan was beside him at the final stretch. The 2 competitors locked eyes, the finish line just ahead. "This is where I leave you behind," Khazar snarled, surging forward. But the final stretch wasn't just a sprint. It was a narrow bridge flanked by high-energy beams that moved erratically. Khazar charged ahead, his large frame narrowly avoiding the beams, but his speed caused the bridge to sway dangerously. Ethan, using his suit's agility, darted through the beams with precision. While Khazar struggled to maintain his balance on the swaying bridge, Ethan's calculated movements kept him steady. As the finish line approached, Khazar roared and leaped forward, his hand reaching for the edge. But Ethan, with one final burst of thrusters, slipped past him and crossed the finish line first. The arena fell silent for a moment, the shock of the human's victory rippling through the crowd. Then, as the realization sank in, the silence was replaced by an eruption of cheers and gasps. Humanity had just outpaced a Lyrian warrior in a trial of speed. Khazar slammed his fist into the ground, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "You got lucky, human," he spat. Ethan, catching his breath, looked down at the alien warrior and smiled. "Luck didn't get me here. Adaptability did. You should try it sometime." The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Seek him in trial complete. The human commandeer takes the lead. Prepare for the third trial. Endurance." As Ethan walked back to his team, the crowd's energy had shifted. No longer was he just a human underdog. Now he was a legitimate contender. And with 2 trials remaining, the galaxy was beginning to wonder, could humanity actually win? The third trial, endurance. The air in the arena had grown thick with tension. The crowd, still buzzing from Ethan's shocking victory in the speed trial, now sat on the edge of their seats. This was the trial many had been waiting for, the test of endurance. It was a battle not of strength or speed, but of sheer willpower, resilience, and the ability to endure pain, fatigue, and impossible odds. The arena shifted once again, morphing into a hostile environment designed to push the competitors to their absolute limits. The ground split open, revealing a series of chambers, each with its own punishing conditions: crushing gravity, biting cold, searing heat, and relentless storms of acid rain. At the far end of the arena, a glowing beacon marked the finish line. But to reach it, the competitors would have to traverse every chamber. Khazar stood at the starting line, rolling his massive shoulders as if shaking off any lingering doubt from the previous trial. His expression was grim, his pride wounded by Ethan's victories. "Endurance is where you fall, human," he growled. "This is no place for technology or clever tricks. This is about survival, and survival is where I thrive." Ethan Wells, standing next to him, was calm but focused. His suit had sustained damage in the speed trial, and the power reserves were running low. Still, his mind was sharp, and his resolve had only grown stronger. He activated the suit's diagnostic display on his wrist, noting the limited energy available for support systems. "This is going to be rough," he muttered under his breath. Dr. Mara Singh's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Ethan, you're going to need to ration your suit's energy carefully. Use it only when absolutely necessary. These chambers are designed to break even the strongest beings. Trust your instincts, and don't let him get inside your head." Ethan gave a small nod. "Got it. Let's do this." The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Third trial. Endurance. The rules are simple. Reach the finish line. The first to arrive while BEDCLARD Trial. Begin in 3, 2, 1. A loud horn signaled the start, and both competitors stepped into the first chamber. Crushing gravity. The moment they entered, an invisible force pressed down on them. The gravity in the chamber was several times that of Earth's, and every movement felt like wading through quicksand. Khazar, with his powerful physique, grunted but pushed forward, his muscles straining under the weight. Each step he took left a deep imprint in the ground. Ethan, on the other hand, activated the suit's gravity dampeners. The effect was minimal. He had to conserve energy, but it allowed him to stay upright and keep moving. He focused on pacing himself, taking measured steps, and controlling his breathing. "Don't rush," he reminded himself. "This isn't a sprint." Khazar glanced back and sneered. "Struggling already, human." Ethan didn't reply. He wasn't about to waste energy on words. Step by step, he moved forward, his mind locked on the exit. The frozen wasteland. The next chamber was a stark contrast to the first. A howling wind swept through the room, carrying ice shards that cut into exposed skin like tiny daggers. The temperature had plummeted to sub-zero levels, and frost began to form on Ethan's suit. Khazar, with his thick skin and alien physiology, barely seemed to notice. He trudged ahead, his massive frame defying the storm. Ethan, however, had to adapt quickly. His suit's thermal regulators struggled to keep up, and his breath came out in visible puffs. His movements slowed as the cold seeped into his muscles. "Mara," he whispered, his teeth chattering, "I need a boost." "Switch to manual heating," Mara instructed. "It'll drain more power, but it's better than freezing solid." Ethan adjusted the controls, feeling a faint warmth spread through his suit. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him moving. He clenched his fists, forcing blood to circulate, and pushed forward. Searing heat. The frozen wasteland abruptly gave way to a furnace. The walls glowed red, and waves of heat radiated from molten streams running along the edges of the chamber. Khazar roared in frustration as the sudden temperature shift forced him to pause. Sweat poured down his body, and his movements became sluggish. Ethan, too, felt the heat hit him like a physical blow. His suit's cooling systems were nearly depleted, and every step felt like walking into an oven. He grabbed a small canister from his belt, a gel pack designed to absorb heat, and pressed it against his chest. The temporary relief was enough to clear his mind. Khazar stumbled ahead, his frustration evident. "This is nothing," he growled, though his pace had noticeably slowed. Ethan kept his head down, focusing on small, steady steps. The key wasn't speed, it was persistence. The storm. The final chamber was chaos incarnate. Lightning crackled across the dark sky above, and acidic rain fell in relentless sheets. The ground was slick and uneven, forcing every step to be a calculated risk. Khazar growled in pain as the acid hissed against his thick skin, but he pressed on, determined to reach the beacon. Ethan's suit began to malfunction, sparks flying as the rain short-circuited parts of the system. His visor flickered, and his comm unit cut out. "Great," he muttered. "Guess it's just me now." He tore off the damaged helmet, letting the rain pelt his face. It stung, but he pushed forward, using what little energy remained in the suit to protect his vital organs. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to stop, but he refused to give in. Khazar reached the final stretch first, his massive body lumbering toward the beacon. The crowd roared, sensing victory for the Lyrian champion. But just as he reached out to touch it, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to one knee. Ethan, drenched and battered, stumbled forward. His vision blurred, and every step felt like it might be his last. But he kept moving, driven by a single thought. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity endured. With a final burst of effort, Ethan reached the beacon. His hand slapped against it just moments before Khazar could recover. The aftermath. The arena fell silent, the crowd stunned into disbelief. A human, a species mocked for its fragility, had outlasted a Lyrian warrior in the galaxy's most grueling trial. The announcer's voice broke the silence. Third trial complete. The human commandeer CLAMS Vexitori. Ethan collapsed to the ground, his chest heaving. As medics rushed to his side, Khazar approached him, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out, but instead, he extended a massive hand. "You're tougher than I thought," Khazar admitted grudgingly. "But don't think this is over." Ethan shook his hand weakly. "It's not about toughness," he said. "It's about never giving up." The stage was set for the final trials, and the galaxy had begun to see humanity in a new light. The final trial, strategy. The arena was eerily quiet as the final trial was unveiled. Above the center of the massive stadium, a holographic battlefield came to life. Planets, fleets, and orbital stations floated in a simulated galaxy, their shimmering forms casting ghostly light over the competitors and the audience. This was no simple physical challenge. It was a test of wits, strategy, and decision-making under pressure. Ethan Wells stood at his console, his fingers hovering over the glowing interface. The human commander looked battered from the previous trials, his body bearing the marks of exhaustion and pain. But his eyes remained sharp, locked onto the holographic display with unwavering focus. Across from him, Khazar loomed over his own console. The Lyrian warrior scowled at the simulation, his hands resting on the controls as though they were foreign objects. Strategy was not his strength, and it showed in the stiffness of his posture, yet his pride wouldn't allow him to admit it. The announcer's metallic voice broke the tense silence. Fine el Tarail. Sturitgui. The rules are simple. Control the most territory and defend your ASCTs to win. Destroying your opponent's core command center EARNs and instant victory. Begin in 3, 2, 1. The holographic galaxy shimmered as both competitors began issuing commands to their simulated fleets. The first moves. Ethan's console lit up with data streams. His initial forces consisted of a balanced mix of small, fast attack ships and larger, heavily armed carriers. His mind raced as he assessed the battlefield. There were asteroid fields, resource-rich planets, and strategic choke points to consider. He quickly divided his fleet, sending scout ships to survey potential resources while positioning his main force to defend key points. Khazar, meanwhile, took a more brute force approach. He sent his largest warships directly toward Ethan's territory, their holographic forms tearing through space like battering rams. The crowd cheered as the Lyrians' bold aggression dominated the opening moves. "Is that all you've got?" Khazar sneered, glancing up from his console. "Hiding behind defenses while I claim the battlefield." Ethan didn't look up. "A strong opening move doesn't win the game," he replied evenly. "It's how you adapt that matters." The mid-game. Adaptation. As Khazar's warships advanced, they found themselves slowed by the asteroid fields Ethan had deliberately chosen as a defensive zone. The massive Lyrian ships struggled to maneuver, their bulky frames colliding with floating debris. Meanwhile, Ethan's smaller, faster ships launched hit-and-run attacks, whittling down the Lyrian forces without sustaining heavy losses. Khazar growled in frustration, his fingers slamming into his console. "Coward, face me directly." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. He'd anticipated this reaction. "You're too focused on brute strength, Khazar. War isn't just about attacking. It's about positioning, timing, and using every advantage." To emphasize his point, Ethan launched a surprise attack on one of Khazar's undefended resource planets. A small squadron of stealth ships slipped past the Lyrians' front line, capturing vital resources and crippling his ability to produce reinforcements. The holographic display updated to show Ethan's growing dominance, his controlled territory spreading like vines across the simulated galaxy. The turning point. Realizing his aggressive tactics weren't working, Khazar changed his approach. He pulled back his remaining forces, consolidating them around his core command center. The move surprised Ethan. It was the first time Khazar had shown restraint. "Mara," Ethan muttered into his comm. "What's he doing? He's never been this defensive." Mara's voice crackled in his ear. "It's a gamble. He's hoping to draw you into an all-out assault. Be careful, it could be a trap." Ethan frowned, studying the battlefield. Khazar's forces were clustered tightly, leaving much of the galaxy unguarded. It was tempting to launch a full-scale attack and end the trial quickly, but something didn't feel right. He adjusted his strategy, sending decoy fleets to probe Khazar's defenses, while secretly amassing the hidden strike force in a nearby nebula. The crowd watched in silence, the tension thick as both competitors prepared for the next move. The final assault. Khazar, growing impatient, launched his own counterattack. His warships surged forward in a last-ditch effort to break Ethan's defenses. The crowd erupted as the Lyrian fleet clashed with Ethan's forces, the holographic display lighting up with simulated explosions. Ethan remained calm, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. He allowed Khazar to push deeper into his territory, drawing the Lyrian forces into a trap. At the critical moment, Ethan's hidden strike force emerged from the nebula, cutting off Khazar's retreat and encircling his fleet. "Checkmate," Ethan said quietly. Khazar's forces crumbled under the coordinated assault. His remaining ships fell back to defend his command center, but it was too late. Ethan's fleet launched a final attack, overwhelming the Lyrian defenses and destroying the core command center in a brilliant flash of light. The aftermath. The arena erupted into stunned silence, followed by an explosion of cheers. The holographic galaxy faded away, replaced by a glowing display that declared, "Victory, Human Commander Ethan Wells." Khazar stared at the blank display, his fists clenched. For a moment, it seemed like he might lash out, but instead, he turned to Ethan and gave a reluctant nod. "You outsmarted me, human. I underestimated you, and your species." Ethan extended a hand, his expression tired but resolute. "It's not about being underestimated. It's about proving that strength isn't the only measure of greatness." Khazar hesitated, then clasped Ethan's hand in a firm grip. The crowd erupted again, their cheers shaking the arena. For the first time, humanity had not only survived but triumphed in a galaxy that had dismissed them as weak and insignificant. As Ethan returned to his team, Mara was waiting with a wide smile. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the roaring crowd. "We did it," he corrected. "And now the galaxy knows. Humanity is here to stay." The final trial had ended, but the story of humanity's rise was just beginning. The aftermath. Humanity's victory. The stadium was alive with noise, an overwhelming roar of cheers, gasps, and murmurs that echoed off the arena walls. The glowing display proclaiming Ethan Wells' victory hovered above the holographic battlefield, casting a golden light over the stunned audience. For the first time in the history of the intergalactic trials, a human had triumphed, not by brute strength or superior physiology, but by sheer willpower, ingenuity, and strategy. Ethan stood at the center of the arena, his body battered and his suit sparking from the trials it had barely survived. His chest rose and fell with exhaustion, but his eyes were clear, sharp, and unyielding. Around him, the murmurs of disbelief began to shift into something more powerful: respect. Khazar approached, his massive frame casting a long shadow over the human commander. The Lyrian warrior's expression was unreadable, his usual arrogance tempered by the events of the trials. The crowd fell silent as the two stood face to face, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. For a moment, it seemed as if Khazar might lash out, his pride unable to accept defeat. But instead, he extended a massive hand. "You fought well, human," he rumbled, his voice low but steady. "Better than I expected. You've earned this victory." Ethan hesitated for only a second before clasping Khazar's hand. The Lyrian's grip was as crushing as his presence, but Ethan held firm, his gaze unwavering. "Strength isn't everything," Ethan replied. "Sometimes it's about heart, strategy, knowing when to push forward and when to adapt. That's what makes humanity strong." Khazar released his hand, his expression softening just slightly. "You've proven that today. I won't forget it, and neither will the galaxy." The shift in perception. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, breaking the solemn moment. "Victory, HCLARED, Commander Ethan Wells of Earth. Humanity has EARED a place of honor in the intergalactic trials." The crowd erupted into applause, the sound deafening. Beings from countless species, some who had mocked humanity just hours before, now cheered for the human who had defied all odds. Flags of Earth appeared on the holographic displays, and chants of "Ethan, Ethan," began to ripple through the audience. Ethan turned to face the crowd, his exhaustion forgotten for a moment as he took in the unprecedented sight. Humanity, once considered the weakest among the galaxy's advanced civilizations, had earned not just victory, but respect. Dr. Mara Singh and the rest of Ethan's team rushed onto the platform, their faces alight with pride and relief. Mara threw her arms around him, ignoring the grime and scorch marks on his suit. "You did it," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You showed them who we are." Ethan smiled, his own voice rough from the trials. "We did it. Humanity did it." A warrior humbled. As the celebrations continued, Kezar stood off to the side, watching in silence. His fellow Lyrian warriors approached cautiously, unsure how their leader would react to his defeat. One of them, a younger warrior with wide, nervous eyes, ventured to speak. "Champion," he began hesitantly, "you fought with honor. But the human. I was defeated." Kezar interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "There's no shame in admitting the truth. The human outmaneuvered me. He outthought me. It's a lesson I will remember." The younger warrior looked surprised but nodded. "Does this mean humanity is stronger than we believed?" Kezar's gaze turned back to Ethan, who was now speaking to the crowd, his words drowned out by the cheering. "Strength comes in many forms," Kezar said quietly. "And today, the galaxy learned that humanity's strength isn't in their bodies. It's in their spirit." A message to the galaxy. As the cheers began to subside, Ethan stepped forward to address the crowd. His voice, amplified by the arena speakers, carried across the massive space. "This victory isn't just for me," he began, his tone steady but filled with emotion. "It's for Earth, for humanity, for everyone who's ever been underestimated or dismissed. We may not have the strongest bodies, but we have something just as powerful: our resilience, our creativity, our determination to rise every time we're knocked down." The crowd listened intently, captivated by his words. Today, humanity proved that strength isn't just about muscles or power. It's about heart. It's about the willingness to fight, even when the odds are stacked against you. And it's about standing together, as one people, to face whatever challenges come our way. A wave of applause followed his speech, but Ethan raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "Let this be a lesson, not just to the galaxy, but to all of us. We're stronger when we work together, when we respect each other, and when we refuse to let fear or doubt hold us back." The beginning of a new era. As the ceremony ended and the arena began to empty, Ethan and his team gathered on the platform, gazing out at the stars visible through the arena's transparent dome. The galaxy suddenly felt a little smaller, its vastness a little less daunting. Mara leaned on the railing, her voice soft. "Do you think they'll really see us differently now?" Ethan smiled, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. "Some will, some won't. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that we showed them what we're capable of. We took a stand, and we proved that we belong here." As the team shared a quiet moment of reflection, a Lyrian warrior approached, one of Kezar's lieutenants. He saluted Ethan, a gesture of respect that had never been shown to a human before. "Commander Wells," the warrior said gruffly, "on behalf of the Lyrian people, I acknowledge your victory. If you ever need an ally, you'll find one in us." Ethan returned the salute, his heart swelling with pride. "Thank you. And if you ever need someone to outthink your enemies, you know where to find me." As the warrior departed, Mara laughed softly. Allies with the Lyrians. Who would fought? Ethan turned back to the stars, his expression thoughtful. "This is just the beginning, Mara. Humanity's story is far from over." And as the team stood together, the galaxy stretched out before them, full of challenges, opportunities, and a future where humanity had finally found its place.